Order. Statement, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Scotland, Minister Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to make a statement about the referendum on independence for Scotland. You will appreciate that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Scotland, is unable to deliver the statement to the House today, as he has attended the meeting between the Prime Minister and the First Minister in Edinburgh to secure agreement on an independence referendum for Scotland. In January this year, my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Scotland, delivered a statement to this House about the referendum. At that time, we acknowledged the Scottish National Party's victory in the May 2012 Scottish Parliamentary election and their manifesto pledge to hold an independence referendum. The Government also made it clear its view that the Scottish Parliament did not have the legal power to legislate for an independence referendum. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, made an offer that the UK Government would bring forward an order to give the Scottish Parliament that legal power. Since January, the UK and Scottish Governments have held consultations. There have been considerable public discussions and debates and numerous discussions between ministers. Many of those discussions took place between myself and Bruce Crawford MSP, Minister for Parliamentary, Business and Government Strategy in the Scottish Government, and I would like to acknowledge his contribution to today's agreement. Now, and following 10 months of deliberation and 4 weeks of direct negotiations between the Scottish Government's Deputy First Minister and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, I am pleased to report to the House today that in Edinburgh, the Prime Minister and the First Minister have made an agreement which will allow a legal, fair and decisive referendum to take place. Mr. Speaker, this is a significant agreement. The two governments have agreed that there should be a referendum. We have agreed that the referendum will consist of a single question. It will offer a choice of remaining in the United Kingdom or independence, and we have agreed that it must be held before the end of 2014. The referendum will be based on the normal legal framework for UK referendums, with oversight from the Electoral Commission. This includes the key issues of how the referendum question will be determined and how the rules governing spending and campaigning will be established. Following today's agreement, the Government will bring forward an order in Council under Section 30 of the Scotland Act. I have today placed a copy of the agreement and the draft order in the library of the House. The agreement and the draft order are also available to members from the Vote Office. This order will be laid before Parliament on 22nd October and will be debated by both Houses of this Parliament and by the Scottish Parliament. All members of this House will have the opportunity to consider and vote on the order. If both Parliaments approve the order, and after its approval by Her Majesty in Council, the Scottish Parliament will have the legal competence to legislate for the referendum. We hope that the order will be passed by February 2013. Once that has happened, the Scottish Government will introduce a referendum bill setting out the wording of the question, the date of the referendum and the rules for the campaign for the Scottish Parliament to consider. As part of today's agreement, the two governments have agreed that the rules for the referendum will be based on the rules set out in the Political Parties, Elections and Referendums Act 2000. Those rules were successfully used in the two referendums that took place last year. The two governments have also confirmed that the Electoral Commission will review the proposed referendum question and its report be laid before the Scottish Parliament. This is the same process as applies to other UK referendums. Interested parties will be able to submit their views on the question to the Electoral Commission in the usual way. The Scottish Government will then respond to the Electoral Commission's report. Mr. Speaker, both governments are agreed on the need for maximum transparency in this process and for a level playing field. Therefore, as part of today's agreement, the Scottish Government will consult the two campaign organisations that have been established for their views before proposing spending limits for the referendum campaign to the Scottish Parliament. The Electoral Commission will also provide the Scottish Government with advice on the appropriate spending limits for the two campaigns in the referendum, as has happened in previous referendums, such as the 2011 referendum in Wales on further powers for the Welsh Assembly. In that referendum, the Electoral Commission recommended that the spending limit for designated campaign organisations should be set by reference to the expenditure limits applying to elections to the relevant legislature. In its response to both government's consultation documents, the Electoral Commission provided its view that this remains the model appropriate for the Scottish Independence Referendum. Mr. Speaker, both the governments agree that all those who were entitled to vote in the Scottish Parliament elections in May 2011 should be able to vote in the referendum. As for all other referendums held in any part of the United Kingdom, it will be the legislation that establishes the referendum which will set the franchise. It will therefore be for the Scottish Parliament to define the franchise in the referendum bill, as it would be in any other referendum or indeed election on matters within its devolved competence. Both governments are agreed that the basis of that franchise shall be the franchise for the Scottish Parliament elections. The Scottish Government, however, has previously set out its proposal for extending the franchise to allow 16- and 17-year-olds to vote. It will now be for them to make the case for that change and to deal with the technical issues that may arise. There are, of course, a range of opinions in this House about changes to the voting age. However, having agreed the principle that the Scottish Parliament should have the legal power to legislate for the referendum, that it should be a referendum made in Scotland, the Government accepts that it would be for the Scottish Parliament to determine the franchise. I fully expect the Scottish Government's proposals will be robustly debated in that Parliament. Any decisions taken by the Scottish Parliament for the referendum will not affect the voting age for parliamentary and local government elections anywhere in the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, today's agreement is important, as will be the consideration of the agreement and the order by this House. But I would also like us to reflect on what will come after. Now that the governments have agreed the process for the referendum, it is vital that we get on with the real debate about the most important political decision that people in Scotland will ever take. The UK Government has already started to prepare the analysis and evidence which people in Scotland are calling for. Over the next year, this Government will publish thorough, evidence-based information which will set out the key issues in the independence debate. That analysis will be comprehensive, robust and open to external scrutiny. I fully expect it to show that Scotland is better off within the United Kingdom and that the rest of the United Kingdom is better with Scotland in it. Mr. Speaker, the Government passionately believes in the United Kingdom. We will work tirelessly over the next 2 years to show the Scottish people and everyone else in this country that together we are stronger, that together we can overcome the challenges confronting us, and that together we can build a better future for Scotland as an integral part of the United Kingdom. The debates ahead will no doubt be long, they will no doubt be challenging and at times heated, but I fervently believe that with the support of colleagues across the House, across Scotland and across the whole of the United Kingdom, in the autumn of 2014, fellow Scots will join me in choosing to stay part of the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, we are indeed better together, and I commend this statement to the House.
Margaret Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for providing me in advance with a copy of the statement. Mr Speaker, this is without doubt an historic day for Scotland and an historic day for the Scottish people. Now indeed is the time for the debate on Scotland's future to move out of the corridors of power and onto the streets of Scotland. Mr Speaker, can I join with the Minister in welcoming the fact that an agreement has now been reached? This brings all Scots, myself included, one step closer to deciding the future of our country. On this side of the House, we welcome that this deal has been reached, but will be seeking guarantees that both parties actually adhere to this agreement in spirit and in practice, and further have a number of questions to raise. Our position has always been that this referendum must be fair, legal and decisive. And so we welcome that there will be a legal referendum with a single question and a regulatory role for the Electoral Commission. Mr Speaker, Labour has always been and will continue to be the party of devolution. Labour brought devolution to Scotland, to Wales and to Northern Ireland, and we will continue to make the case for our devolution settlement to develop and evolve. We are and have always been a party of constitutional renewal. And as a Labour Party, we know that the best interests of our people are served by binding together, not breaking apart. So in the debate on our future over the next 2 years, we will be promoting devolution within the Union against those who would seek to bring it to an end. Mr Speaker, this agreement sets out a framework for how we will move forward to the referendum. But there are a number of points on which I would welcome some clarity, which I hope the Minister will be able to address this evening. Firstly, clearly the Electoral Commission should play a significant role in this process, in particular with regard to the referendum question and the funding of campaigns. Can the Minister provide assurances to the House that the Memorandum of Agreement ensures that the Scottish Government must comply with and not turn their backs on the advice of the Electoral Commission? And if they do so or seek to do so, what action will be taken? Given that no other government has ever done so, this would be exceptionally damaging for the conduct and the process of the referendum. Secondly, the terms of the agreement leave significant ambiguity regarding the funding of each of the campaigns and the opportunity for financing or related activity from interested third parties. Could the Minister therefore tell me, does the agreement ensure that the limits set by the Electoral Commission will be binding? Will organisations such as trade unions and businesses be able to participate in the referendum in a comparable way to they participated in the Welsh and AV referendums? And does the Minister agree with me that it is troubling that even before the agreement was signed, saying the Electoral Commission would have such a regulatory role, the First Minister's aides were briefing the press that they would be willing to ignore the Electoral Commission? Finally, we must ensure that there is adequate scrutiny of this agreement and the subsequent process in this House. Can the Minister therefore explain what opportunity there will be to debate the detail of the Section 30 order on the floor of this House? And can the Minister assure me that either he or the Secretary of State will provide regular updates to this House as the process continues over the next 2 years? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I welcome the Honourable Lady's welcome of the agreement and indeed her contribution to the debate which has led to this agreement. I think it is important that the agreement sets out a clear role for the Electoral Commission, both in relation to the question and in relation to funding of the campaign. I think it is very difficult to envisage circumstances in which the Scottish Government would want to ignore the Electoral Commission's recommendations. As she herself has said, no government has ever ignored those recommendations previously, and I think that there would be not just a procedural issue, but there would be a significant political price to pay for any party that sought to do so. But, Mr Speaker, I do not think that we should ever underestimate the Scottish people. I think it is wrong to suggest that the Scottish people could somehow be duped into supporting independence by any form of chicanery or trickery that might come from either side of this debate. The Scottish people are much too sensible for that, and I have every confidence that when the referendum comes, whatever the form of the question and however the campaign has been funded, they will make the right decision.
Sir Gerald Howarth.
Mr. Speaker, as an Anglo-Scot, like my honourable friend and the Prime Minister, I believe passionately in the Union, and I believe that this campaign to remove Scotland must fail. The Electoral Commission's involvement, I think, is much to be commended, and I commend my honourable friend for what he has said about that. However, I do believe that the proposal to extend the franchise to 16-year-olds who cannot lawfully buy alcohol, they cannot drive a motor car or be called to fight on the front line, and are now being invited to opine on one of the greatest constitutional issues of our time, is surely a nonsense, and indeed a dangerous nonsense insofar as I do believe it will create a dangerous precedent.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure my right honourable friend that it will not create a precedent. The franchise for parliamentary and local government elections throughout the United Kingdom will be determined by opinions in this House. At the moment, the government has no proposals to change the voting age, and I do not believe there is a majority in this House to do so. But what I say to him and others who share his views is that they must now take these arguments to Scotland and to the Scottish Parliament so that they can be held to account in the Scottish Government bringing forward these proposals. This is a moment for the Scottish Parliament to demonstrate its own robust ability to scrutinise legislation, and when it identifies complexities, of which there are many, with enfranchising 16 and 17-year-olds, to hold the Scottish Government to account and to argue against that proposal.
But Hoosey.
Can I thank the Minister for his statement? He'll forgive me if I don't welcome the final 2 or 3 paragraphs, but I do thank him for the very early sight of it. This is historic, and can I agree with the Minister when he said it's the most important decision we'll ever take. It also has the potential to be exciting and transformative for Scotland when the Scottish people vote yes. Can I say that I very much welcome the 2014 timeline. That, of course, is the Scottish Government's favoured position. Can I welcome the extension to 16 and 17-year-olds in the franchise, also a Scottish Government position. And can I ask him to agree with me that the most exciting part of this is that the Scottish Parliament, as he said, will be the final determiner in the question, because they have the only mandate of any parliament in the UK to set a question on independence for Scotland.
Mr. Speaker, I am surprised the honourable gentleman didn't tell us that the Scottish National Party only wanted one question as well. But I don't agree with him, because I'm afraid his question reveals his party's obsession with process. What is important is not ultimately who legislates on this matter. It is the decision that the people of Scotland take. And it is the opportunity for them to take that decision and to end the uncertainty and to vote to remain part of the United Kingdom.
Sir Mingus Campbell.
May I offer my unqualified endorsement of the statement made so eloquently, if I may say so, by my honourable friend? Does he, like me, hope that the shadow boxing will now come to an end, and that the uncharacteristic reticence of the Scottish National Party, demonstrated again this afternoon, to tell the people of Scotland precisely what their proposals are for independence, will at last come to an end? But may I offer him a crumb or two of comfort, if you'll forgive the sporting metaphor, a second sporting metaphor. The Scottish Liberal Democrats will be first off their marks on Wednesday when we publish our proposals for Home Rule for Scotland within the United Kingdom. On Wednesday.
Mr. Speaker, I have to say I'd understood that the Liberal Democrats brought forward proposals for Home Rule for Scotland 100 years ago, but I'm sure that we will look forward to the honourable gentleman's contribution to that debate, and he has made a distinguished contribution over the years to the discussion of Scotland's constitutional future. I think the people of Scotland will indeed be pleased that we can move on from a debate and discussion which has been purely about a process to a debate on the real issues. The Prime Minister has committed, those campaigning in the Better Together organisation have committed to set out a positive vision for the United Kingdom and Scotland playing a part in it. But it is incumbent on those arguing for independence for Scotland to finally answer the questions and set out what independence would really mean.
Straw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last time that the Electoral Commission considered the issues of whether 16 and 17-year-olds should vote, they found that 78% of the British public, including the Scots, were against that change. And whatever opinion this House and members of this House and members of the public may take on the issue, why doesn't the Minister acknowledge that the question of the franchise for referendum as well as for elections is plainly by law a matter reserved to the United Kingdom Parliament and not to any devolved administration? And will he therefore say, given my honourable friend for Glasgow East's questions about the need for further scrutiny in this House, how this House will be able to have a prior vote on whether or not there can be votes at 16 or 17 in any kind of poll across the whole of this Union?
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the right honourable gentleman that in all previous legislation setting out referendums, that legislation has set the franchise. So in doing so in the Scottish Parliament, in setting out the terms of this referendum and setting the franchise, this procedure will be no different. There will be an opportunity for all members of this House to vote on the order, the Section 30 order, which passes the powers for holding this referendum to the Scottish Parliament, and there will be the opportunity for a robust debate. But I say to all of those who are concerned about 16 and 17-year-olds being given the vote in Scotland to make that argument now in Scotland and to demonstrate the complexities and difficulties of the proposals which the SNP are bringing forward.
John Redwood.
Who speaks for England in these matters in the government? And when will English MPs be able to settle English issues without outside help in this Parliament?
Well, I'm sure, as the right honourable gentleman will be aware, this government has established a commission which is looking at the so-called West Lothian question, which will indeed deal with the very issue that he raises, which is the governance of England within a range of devolved settlements for the other nations of the United Kingdom.
Thomas Clark.
Mr. Speaker, has anyone the responsibility, and if so, who are they, to seek to ensure that when this debate is being reported over 2 years, that they can expect in Scotland the impartiality, particularly in broadcasting, which hasn't always been the case?
Mr. Speaker, I'm aware from other contributions to television in Scotland that others feel strongly about bias in some elements of the media. I can assure the right honourable gentleman that the normal rules that he would expect to apply within an election period will apply during the course of the referendum process.
Mrs. Eleanor Lang.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister appreciate that while there are grave reservations from most people here in this House about the peculiarities of the proposed franchise, that there is also wide agreement that the most important thing about the compromise reached by the Prime Minister is that there should be one decisive question on the ballot paper, so that the future of Scotland as part of the United Kingdom, to the benefit of everyone in every part of the United Kingdom, should be decided once and for all.
Mr. Speaker, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. It has been the Government's position throughout these discussions that there should be a single question in or out of the United Kingdom, and that in the course of that debate, independence and devolution should not be conflated.
Anas Sarwar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all welcome the statement from the Minister? With regards to the actual debate coming up, and particularly the scope of the Electoral Commission, already we've seen in the First Minister's own press conference and also from statements from his ministers on television that they are already rowing back from the role of the Electoral Commission. Let's not be naive about the role of the Scottish Parliament. This is a man who thinks he is Scotland and speaks for everyone in Scotland. And what process will there be to make sure we actually have the recommendations of the Electoral Commission actually put in force?
Mr. Speaker, I certainly agree with the honourable gentleman that Mr. Salmon does not speak for Scotland, no matter how much he seeks to hold himself out as doing so. But I don't agree with him that Mr Salmon or the Scottish Parliament can blithely ignore the recommendations of the Electoral Commission. The Commission's recommendations have never been ignored by a government before, and it would be a serious political matter if that were to happen, and I'm sure that the honourable gentleman and others on his side of the House would waste no time in drawing that to the attention of the Scottish people.
Sir Malcolm Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the Minister's statement and say that the exchanges we've heard already demonstrate that we in this House and the Scottish Parliament have an absolute responsibility to ensure that the outcome of this referendum commands the full confidence of the people of Scotland, and that involves responsibility on both sides. And does he agree with me that all parts of the United Kingdom have a distinctive contribution to make, that the sum is much greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that we'd all be diminished if we were to break up this 300-year union?
I absolutely agree with my right honourable friend that we are better together, that the sum of the parts is the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that will be a significant part of the debate as we go forward. I expect people from all parts of the United Kingdom, not just from within Scotland, although the campaign will be led by Scots within Scotland. I expect people from all parts of the United Kingdom to make the case for the continuance of the United Kingdom.
McKechin.
Speaker, while there are obviously differing views about extending the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds, I hope the Minister will agree it is important that young people in Scotland are treated with respect and not cynically in the way in which this proceeds. Will he confirm what assurances he has that those 16 and 17-year-olds will have the equal ability to register as any other person of any other age who is currently an adult to vote in this important poll which will determine their future?
As the honourable lady knows, that is one of the significant complexities which the Scottish Government face if they are to bring forward their proposal for 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. If they use the current electoral register, they will essentially be only able to allow those who are 16 years and 10 months to vote. If they wish all 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, they will have to create their own register, and that carries with it significant complexities.
Mary MacLeod.
Mr. Speaker, and may I congratulate my right honourable friend as well as the Prime Minister for reaching this agreement with the First Minister in Scotland. And does he agree with me as someone who believes that we are far better together as United Kingdom? But does he agree with me that it is now time to move on to determining in full the real debate, which is looking at, I think, the very dubious suggestions from the SNP about defence, EU membership and also currency?
I think my honourable friend does the SNP some extra credit by suggesting that they have views on the issues which she's set out. What has become apparent in recent weeks and months is that despite campaigning for independence over many years, indeed decades, the SNP have no clear idea what an independent Scotland would look like. Now that these process issues are out of the way, it will be incumbent on them to come forward with their specific proposals for what an independent Scotland would look like.
Frank Roy.
Can the Minister give me those Scottish members of the armed forces and their families who find themselves based out with Scotland during the referendum will be entitled to vote?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Scottish members of the armed forces and their families will be entitled to vote under the normal rules that apply to members of the armed forces.
Anne Main.
Speaker, I wholeheartedly concur with my right honourable gentleman's comments of the right honourable gentleman for Blackburn. By yoking together these two issues, we are causing ourselves a huge difficulty, and some of us may feel that actually voting for the Section 30 order means that in fact we're endorsing the 16 to 17-year-old vote. It will be impossible to imagine that should we ever have a vote on the referendum of the EU, for example, that we could deny 16 and 17-year-olds of votes in the UK. We must insist that 16 and 17-year-olds either have the vote wholeheartedly, or as I believe, they should not have the vote on this major constitutional issue.
I'm afraid I can't agree with the Honourable Lady's bringing together of those two issues. This Parliament will determine the franchise for any referendum determined by this Parliament. The Scottish Parliament is determining the franchise for a referendum which has been devolved to them. And the Scottish Parliament indeed already has the power to set the age in any election for which it has devolved responsibility, and has done so in Health Board elections and Crofting Commission elections in Scotland. And so the issue of whether this is a precedent for 16 and 17-year-olds voting has already been set.
Engel.
As a supporter of votes at 16, I welcome the Scottish Parliament wanting to extend the franchise to 16-year-olds. And far from seeing it as setting a dangerous precedent, why won't the Government seize this opportunity to consult, debate and vote on widening the franchise to 16-year-olds in all of UK elections and in every kind of election, from referendum, local elections and national elections?
In simple terms, Mr. Speaker, because the Government does not support 16 and 17-year-olds voting in those elections.
Smith.
And I welcome this agreement giving us a single legally based question that can settle the future for Scotland once and for all. But can he reinforce the message that any Parliament or Government that chooses to ignore the advice of the Electoral Commission will be judged by the public for what it has done?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I have absolute faith in the people of Scotland that they are not going to be duped by chicanery or trickery, whether by the Scottish Government or anybody else, in making this most important decision about the future of Scotland. And if anyone thinks that any party in this referendum is guilty of such a charge, then it is their job to hold them to account, to have debate, whether in this Parliament or in the Scottish Parliament. I think we can be confident, because I can see no reason why they wouldn't, whatever their spin doctors say, why the Scottish Government would ignore the recommendations of the Electoral Commission, given that no other government has done so before.
Reid.
I welcome the Minister's statement. In fetching forward a detailed analysis of what this actually means for the people of Scotland and England, will the Government commit themselves to analysis of the sheer volumes of radioactive materials from Scotland stored in England, how much it will cost to remove those to Scotland, where in Scotland they will be buried, and who is going to be responsible for those in the long term? Who will be aware that foreign wastes cannot be disposed of in Britain?
I think the honourable gentleman makes a very good point, but it is for those proposing change to bring forward how they would deal with these changes. The Government does not wish to break up Britain. It does not wish to see a change to the existing arrangements for the storage of nuclear waste. But those people who want to do that have to set out clearly how it would be done and what it would cost.
Mr Bob Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Sadly, I'm not 16 or 17, a little bit older. But as an Anglo-Scot, I do feel slightly disenfranchised that the decision on my father's homeland will be made without me having one bit of say in the matter. And I request, please, can we, the Scots of the dispersion, also have a say in what happens to our ancient homeland?
I'm sure that the honourable gentleman will have the opportunity to have a say by coming to Scotland and setting forth his passionate views for Scotland remaining within the United Kingdom. I think the issue that he seeks to raise, which has been raised legitimately by many Scots throughout the other parts of the United Kingdom, is why they shouldn't have a vote. And the Government's position on this has always been that it would be for those people in a part of the United Kingdom which wish to leave the United Kingdom to have a say in determining whether they left or not. And that is in accordance with international protocol in terms of separation of nations, and was, of course, the franchise which determined devolution to Scotland in 1997.
Mr Pete Wishart.
Mr Speaker, today has been an utterly fantastic day. The Edinburgh Agreement, the next stage in our nation's story, and I can't wait to get out and put that compelling and positive case for my nation's independence. The Minister says he wants a real choice. He wants to see different visions. Well, next year in November, the Scottish Government will release a full and comprehensive prospectus about what independent Scotland will look like. When will the no parties get together, because they agree on so much now? They agree on anti-universality, on means testing, on an austerity programme. When are they going to get together and let us know what the no proposition for this referendum is going to be?
Mr Speaker, for one moment I thought that the honourable gentleman said the Scottish Government were going to bring forward their proposals in November, but in fact it is November next year. For a party that has campaigned for years, decades, for independence, the fact that you have no proposals on the table for what an independent Scotland would look like is reflective of the lack of thought that you have given to that issue, and is unbecoming of you and is unworthy of the people of Scotland.
As far as I'm aware, I've done nothing unbecoming or unworthy, but it is true that I have given no particular thought to this matter and I have no proposals to make on it. Sarah Newton.
Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree with me that indeed home rule for Scotland is available right now within the Union, as indeed it is for any part of this country, as a result of a range of government measures, most notably the Localism Act?
Mr Speaker, firstly can I say I've always found you most becoming, and I apologise for suggesting otherwise. Indeed, the Honourable Lady makes a very important point. Very significant additional powers are about to come to Scotland and the Scottish Parliament through the Scotland Act 2012, which will see the most significant transfer of financial powers since the Act of Union 300 years ago. I think that the focus of the Scottish Government and Scottish Parliament should be on the implementation of those powers to the benefit of the people of Scotland.
Gemma Doyle.
No sooner was the ink signed on this agreement than Scottish Government ministers were out dismissing the role of the Electoral Commission in this process. So can I urge the Minister against complacency? For anyone that is involved in Scottish politics, it is perfectly plausible that President Alex will ignore the Electoral Commission and will set his own biased question. So can I urge him to look very carefully again at the issue of the question?
The Scottish Government will bring forward in their referendum bill the wording of a question. It will be then open to anyone else, including the leaders of other political parties in Scotland who have engaged in an extensive exercise to allow the Electoral Commission to conduct the sort of scrutiny which they have done in the past in relation, for example, to the alternative vote referendum that took place across the whole of the United Kingdom. I remain confident in the people of Scotland that they are not simply going to be duped into breaking up Britain because of some trickery or other behaviour by any of the parties to this debate. If anybody suspects that that is the case or are dissatisfied with a Scottish Parliament rejection of the Electoral Commission report, which I still consider unlikely, then it is for them to make within the political arena that issue.
Mr David Rutsley.
I welcome a fair referendum, and I share my honourable friend's view that the continuation of the Union is an important priority. Does my honourable friend agree, though, that the Union should continue on a basis that is fair to all the parties that are involved in it?
I absolutely agree with that, but I think the first and overriding consideration that we have now is to resolve the issue of whether Scotland wishes to remain part of the United Kingdom, so that we can put that issue to bed. No doubt in future years there will continue to be a debate about the governance of the whole of the United Kingdom, and we in this Parliament, and indeed those in Scotland and the Scottish Parliament, will be able to play a part in that debate too.
Mrs Anne Maguire.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Harking back to my honourable friend from Mary Hill's question and the Minister's answer, surely there would be some responsibility on the UK Government that if the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government want all 16 and 17-year-olds to have the vote, then it frankly isn't good enough for the Minister just to say that it's a complex issue. He should be looking at ways in which he encourages the registration of all of those 16-year-olds so that we don't have registration by voluntary activity and should have registration in the same way as every other voter is elected or is registered.
I certainly would encourage everyone to register for this most important vote. The point which I made to the Honourable Lady previously is that basically the Scottish Government will have two options. One option will be to use the existing register, on which those people who are to be 18 within the electoral cycle of that register can vote, or to create a new register. Whichever option they choose, if that is the decision of the Scottish Parliament, then of course we would urge all those with the ability to vote to register to do so.
Mr Alan Reid.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I congratulate the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State and the Minister on reaching this important agreement. But it's important that before people come to vote in the referendum, they know what they're voting for. And when the SNP eventually, in another 13 months, get round to working out the proposals for independent Scotland, will the government put those proposals to independent scrutiny so that people can vote knowing what the proposals actually mean?
As I indicated, Mr Speaker, in my statement, the Government is already itself carrying out extensive analysis which will be on an objective basis, which will clearly set out the benefits of the United Kingdom and Scotland playing a part in it. And I think the people of Scotland will be able to contrast that with the lack of clarity, lack of any substantive proposal and uncertainty coming from the SNP.
Mr Ian Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I welcome the statement, but can I press the Minister yet again on what mechanism is in place for this House to have a view if the Scottish Government, as they have already indicated, do not take the advice of the Electoral Commission?
Mr. Speaker, the opportunity for members, firstly, in relation to the issue as a whole, will be the debate on the order, and all members of the House will have a vote on that order. In terms of the Electoral Commission's proposals being brought forward, if they were to be rejected, and there is no formal statement from the Scottish Government that they were to be rejected, if they were to be rejected, the Scottish Government would have to be held to account for that by the people of Scotland, by politicians in this House, by the honourable gentleman's counterparts in the Scottish Parliament. I have faith in the people of Scotland that if they see the Scottish Government flagrantly rejecting proposals brought forward by the Electoral Commission and any suggestion of trickery in the question, that they will not look well on those who have perpetrated that act.
Mr. David Mowat.
Mr. Speaker, we seem to have used the piecemeal extension of the franchise as part of a negotiating process. What concerns me is that 16-year-olds will be voting on the sovereignty of their country, and yet 6 months later they will be unable to vote in council elections. How can that be right or coherent?
The Government doesn't support the extension of the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds, and indeed our Conservative colleagues will argue against that proposal when it comes before the Scottish Parliament. It will be for the Scottish Government to make the case for 16 and 17-year-olds voting in the referendum. That debate needs now to go to Scotland, to engage with the people of Scotland, to engage with parliamentarians in the Scottish Parliament, so that there can be a full and proper debate. And I do remain hopeful that the Scottish Parliament will fully scrutinise any such proposals brought forward, and if they are defective, they will reject them.
Sandra Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The suffragettes did not campaign for the vote on a one-off basis or for a particular part of the United Kingdom. I believe this is doing a disservice to young people throughout the United Kingdom. But is it not irresponsible of the Government to pass responsibility for the franchise on when they are clearly aware there are major technical difficulties should these not be sorted out at a UK level? And what will the cost be to the Scottish taxpayer, for example, if a separate register is set up?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable lady's final question is one for the Scottish Government and to be asked within the Scottish Parliament. And the honourable lady's colleagues within the Scottish Parliament must hold the Scottish Government to account in relation to any proposals which it brings forward in relation to this referendum. I happen to agree with her that it is not right that there should be different franchises for different elections, but again, that is a point to be made in the debate in Scotland.
John Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister confirm that the Electoral Commission will be involved in the setting of the date of the actual referendum? For example, I would not like to see the referendum date be held during the autumn school holidays in Scotland.
The decision on the date for the referendum, Mr. Speaker, will be one for the Scottish Parliament.
Pamela Nash.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister's made it very clear today that he would find it completely unacceptable if the Scottish Government ignored the advice of the Electoral Commission on the wording of the question. Why then are there not clear consequences for this eventuality in the agreement?
Mr. Speaker, we are following exactly the same process and procedures that were followed in relation to the alternative vote referendum that took place across the United Kingdom, where the Electoral Commission reported to this Parliament, and then it was a decision for this Parliament to determine whether or not it would follow that advice.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable gentleman said he couldn't wait to get out there and debate this issue. Of course, they have waited. They've waited and waited. Can I congratulate my honourable friend and the Prime Minister on the patience and quiet diplomacy that has flushed these people out. And now they can wriggle on the franchise, they can wriggle on the question, they can even wriggle on the date they hold it. But the Scottish people will have a chance to examine their arguments finally and put them where they belong, in the bin, when they reject this outrageous attempt to split up this country.
I very much thank my honourable friend for that very robust contribution, and he is right. The people of Scotland will see through the lack of detailed policy coming from the Scottish National Party in relation to what an independent Scotland would be like. But as I've said in response to other questions, they will also see through any trickery or chicanery attempted in the setting of the question, the setting of the franchise or the spending limits.
Brian Donohoe.
Much, Mr. Speaker. On the question of 16 and 17-year-olds, if, as is possible, not every single 16 and 17-year-old gets the opportunity of voting, there could be a challenge, a legal challenge, against that decision. What then happens to the referendum in these circumstances?
Yep. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that whatever else, the Scottish Government will want to ensure that whatever proposals they come forward to allow 16 and 17 years old to vote in the referendum, that those will be legally watertight.
Mike Crockart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is indeed a welcome settling of process issues, and it's very welcome that we can now, thankfully, move not onto but back to the real debate. As has already been said, next year marks 100 years since the passing of the second reading of the Home Rule Bill in this very place. So we on these benches have been honing our alternative for 100 years. Would he join me in urging the other unionist and indeed independence parties to do the same?
Mr. Speaker, I do respect the long record of the Liberal Democrat Party and its predecessors in pursuing these issues, and no doubt as they go forward to the 2015 general election, they will be setting out a range of proposals for the people of Scotland. What I think is important now is that we settle this question as to whether Scotland remains part of the United Kingdom or becomes a separate nation state, and that's what we can achieve by a single question referendum.
Greatrix.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister referred to allowing a legal, fair and decisive referendum, and I think as far as it's gone today means it may well be legal. But does he not accept that the question of fairness and therefore decisiveness rests on the question? And his inability this evening, to actually explain what the consequences would be if the Scottish Government, as they've indicated today they may well do, decide to ignore the advice of the Electoral Commission, leaves this whole process in question.
I don't agree with the honourable gentleman, Mr. Speaker. The consequences for the Scottish Government of ignoring the Electoral Commission with the people of Scotland will be very significant, and it will diminish their argument in the process. I have confidence in the people of Scotland to see through that argument.
Mr. Michael McCann.
Mr. Speaker, my daughter Erin turned 18 last week, so she'll definitely have the vote, and she's already assured me that she'll be voting to remain in the United Kingdom because she knows we are better together. But can I also remind the Minister that the SNP had the opportunity to extend the franchise in the 2012 local government elections and chose not to do so. So therefore, is the Government's confidence in ceding this territory in negotiations based on the fact that it will be impossible to implement in the timescale envisaged?
I welcome the honourable gentleman's daughter's support for Scotland remaining part of the United Kingdom, and indeed she is reflective of the views of many 16 and 17 and indeed 18-year-olds, as demonstrated by the polls in Scotland. I think it is important that as we move forward with the process, that we take forward the issues and debates in the Scottish Parliament, and that the people of Scotland are engaged in those debates.
Mr. Ian Davidson.
Could I welcome the fact that an agreement has been reached, and can I say how much I welcome the opportunity to vote finally against separation? But can I ask the Minister, why do we have to wait so long? Absolutely. Why the delay? Why the dither? And is it not because we have simply had the coalition ministers on the one hand and the SNP on the other meeting in secret, not taking account of the views of the vast majority of the Scottish people? I mean, our consultation from Westminster said we wanted the referendum to be soon. The Scottish Government's consultation said well, we're not quite sure what they've said because they haven't actually published it. So the deal has been reached before it's been published. What scrutiny is there going to be of the detail of this arrangement? For example, are tax exiles going to have the right to vote? Are we going to have foreign money coming in? Is there going to be the opportunity to amend any of these detailed proposals? Not the broad sweep, but the detailed proposals. And what sanctions will there be if somebody breaks an agreement that was reached in good faith?
The Chair of the Select Committee has posed at least 4 questions, to which I know the ingenuity of the Minister will enable him to reply with a single response.
Mr. Speaker, I expect that both myself and the Secretary of State will appear before the Honourable Gentleman's Committee to answer those questions in detail.
Mr. John Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I have great faith in the Scottish people, and I have great faith in 16 and 17-year-olds. We underestimate them all at our peril. But I have absolutely no faith in this coalition, and I have no faith in the executive north of the border. The 16 and 17-year-olds will be allowed to vote in a Scottish separation, and yet in 6 or 7 months after that, they will not be allowed to vote in a general election. How would you vote if you were 16 or 17 under these stance? Answer that.
I would refer the Honourable Gentleman firstly to polling in Scotland which indicates that 16 and 17-year-olds do not support independence. Secondly, I urge him to take his argument to Scotland, to the Scottish Parliament, to his Scottish Labour MSP colleagues in the Scottish Parliament to make that robust case.
Mr. Russell Brown.
Can I say to the Minister, obviously he's heard from my colleague from Glasgow North and from Stirling and 2 of my colleagues from Ayrshire about the whole aspect of 16 and 17-year-olds, some of them becoming disenfranchised because they are not on that register. Can I say I am absolutely positive that during the discussions that he and his colleagues have had, someone somewhere may have raised the issue of a legal challenge. Does he have any idea, if there is a legal challenge in all of this, how much delay there might be?
Firstly, Mr. Speaker, my experience of the Labour Party in Dumfries and Galloway is that they're very good at getting people onto the electoral register, and I'm sure that they will be so again in getting 16 and 17-year-olds. The Scottish Government will have to come forward with proposals which are legally watertight. Otherwise, those proposals will be subject to challenge. We've heard that there is a basis on which they could conduct the election already, the referendum already, with those so-called attainers, that is, people who will be 18 within the cycle of the electoral register. I think it is clear that that could be done legally. The downside of that, from the Scottish Government's point of view, is, of course, that all 16 and 17-year-olds would not be able to vote because they would not be on the register because of the age limitation. The other option for them is to create their own register, but if they were to do that, they would have to be sure that it was legally watertight.
Isla Stewart.
Trust is good, but verification is always much better. So, can the Minister not accept that the only way we can assure that the Electoral Commission's recommendations are going to be complied with is to bring the actual question of the referendum back to this whole House for a vote?
I don't agree with the Honourable Lady's proposition. The Government's position as it approached this referendum and the discussions on the agreement was that the referendum should be made in Scotland and that the Scottish Parliament would be devolved the powers. I believe that there are very significant political difficulties to be encountered by the Scottish Government if they were to become the first government in the history of the UK to ignore the views of the Electoral Commission.
Mark Lazarevich.
Why would it not be possible for the voter registration form in 2013 to ask for details of anyone over 16 on the date of referendum to be included? Is that too obvious, or is that a simple solution? Thank you.
That is not a power which has been devolved to the Scottish Parliament in terms of the order agreed today.
Katie Clark.
complexities in relation to 16 and 17-year-olds are young people who are not put on the register due to child protection issues. If this government sees that that aspect of the referendum, the question or any other aspect is unfair, will it take action?
Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady's colleagues in the Scottish Parliament will have the opportunity to highlight that. And of course, if any proposals are brought forward which are not in accordance with accordance of the legislative framework in relation to other issues, then they will not be able to stand.
Mr Jim McGovern.
Mr Speaker, given the responses to at least 3 of my honourable friends' questions earlier on regarding the question, it would appear that the UK Government think that the measures outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding lead them to believe that a fair and clear question would be presented to the people of Scotland. Obviously, some of us on this side have our doubts. Could the Minister just tell us, if a dubious question is put, will it be open to legal challenge?
All acts of the Scottish Parliament can clearly be subject to legal challenge, but I think that it is quite clear that if the Scottish Government were to reject the views of the Electoral Commission in relation to the question, the Electoral Commission having carried out the thorough scrutiny which they have done in relation to previous referendum questions, that there would be a very high political price for them to pay, and that the honourable gentleman and others, both in this House and the Scottish Parliament, would waste no time in pointing that out to the people of Scotland.
Cathy Jamieson.
Mr Speaker, I wonder if I could briefly return to the issue of the franchise, and I wonder if in the detailed discussions that have taken place any account was taken of the experience in Scotland of the Health Board elections in relation to those under the age of 18, and does the Minister agree with me that it is incumbent now on the Scottish Government to say exactly what the franchise would be? Is it all 16 and 17-year-olds, or is it on the basis of the current electoral register?
I absolutely agree with the Honourable Lady. It is now incumbent for the Scottish Government to come forward with their proposals, and it's incumbent on those people who have a view on this matter to take that debate to Scotland and the Scottish Parliament, and I hope that this issue will demonstrate the Scottish Parliament at its best, scrutinising in great detail proposals brought forward and giving a fair and objective assessment of them.
Mr Greg McClymont.
Speaker, the Electoral Commission, of course, is a very respected United Kingdom institution. The difficulty is that the Scottish National Party does not have a great track record in respecting UK institutions. We think most recently of the attempt to brand our Olympic athletes as Scalympians, which failed dismally, I'm delighted to say. But can the Minister give us an example of where the Scottish Government has respected fully UK institution?
I think that the Scottish Government respects UK institutions in its day-to-day working with the UK Government. It doesn't always want to acknowledge that. It doesn't always want to acknowledge that publicly. But on a day-to-day basis, the Scottish Government and the UK Government work closely in relation to many aspects of devolved and reserved issues. But I think the honourable gentleman makes an excellent point. When the First Minister of Scotland tried to designate part of Team GB Scalympians, he was laughed at by the people of Scotland. And if he tries in any way to gerrymander this referendum, the people of Scotland will see through it. I trust them to do that.
Order.